We are using the yellow Nifty Knitter loom, and this one has 41 pegs on it. We're not going to be using all the pegs at the beginning. What we're doing is we're going to take from my hooded scarf video and apply it to using it on a round loom to make ourselves another kind of hooded object. So what we're going to do is you're going to cast on, but you're going to leave 2 pegs empty. So you do your slip knot, and you can choose to change up the cast on if you want. I'm just going to do simple E-wrap in order to make it a little easier. So we're not going to cast on these pegs. We're going to drop our yarn to there, and these pegs will be empty. We're going to work our way around the loom until we get to this peg of a cast on. So go ahead and do your E-wrap cast on, and making sure that you only go to this peg right here. Now again, remember, we're leaving these 2 pegs empty, and we're only working it to this peg. So again, these are empty. We're going to work our way back and finishing off our cast on. You can go ahead and gently push these down so you're all ready when you work your way back. And if you want, you can work it 1 peg at a time back so that you don't have to worry about going back and rewrapping it. So I'm going to continue this until I get back to the first peg again, and then we'll come back and do the next step. We are close, back to the beginning. Now, as you can tell, I used 2 strands of worsted weight yarn. And again, with the Nifty Knitter looms, I always usually say it's good to use a bulky yarn, or definitely doubling up your yarn. But you can even see that there's a few little gaps, so you may even want to triple up your yarn for this project if you want. Go ahead and push all these back down after you've done your cast on row. And what we're going to do now is we're going to do a process similar to what I did again on my hooded cowl, but we're going to use this one instead. So I'm going around and I'm pushing these down just to get them out of my way for the next step. Excuse me. Now this is where a couple stitch markers are going to come in handy. So just give me 1 second. Okay, so I have 2 stitch markers. I like these because they kind of loop together. And I'm going to kind of place it, where I want to stop. Because we're going to work this back and forth, but we're kind of working it where we're decreasing. So the first time we do it, we're going to work till we hit certain pegs. And eventually we're just going to end up only working about half the pegs and then working our way back out. I know that doesn't make sense right now, but I just wanted to explain that it is going to be a little bit of a process, so it's very important that you pay attention to how I'm doing it now. So I'm going to zoom in down here so you can see. What I'm going to do is I'm going to place my stitch markers on these outer pegs. What this means is that with them being here, I'm getting ready to work my yarn this way around the loom till I get back over here, but I'm going to stop here. I'm not going to stop on this one. I'm going to be working my way back and forth, decreasing in order to create this hooded cowl. So I want to place this here because when I work my way back, excuse me if I can get it around here, this will let me know not to go past this point. So all I'm doing is I'm placing it on the peg so that I know when I'm working this as a flat panel, I'm not going to go past that point. Like I said, this one likes to fight me a little bit. So we're just going to do that one. That's one for there, and then you're going to do the same on this side. We're not going to this peg when we do our flat panel. We're going to now stop at this peg. So you want to place a little marker there so that you know not to go past that mark. So see, I got my stitch marker. I'm going to loop them up in a minute. But I've got my stitch markers again so that I can show you when I get closer that I'm going to be stopping on these pegs and not these pegs. So this time when we go around, so again, this time when I go around as a flat panel, I'm going to stop on this peg, as you can see, where my stitch marker is. So you're going to work around We're going to just do the simple E-wrap, because if we try to add too much other design, I believe it's going to get a little confusing for you guys. But once you get the habit of how we're doing this basic back and forth motion, and that, you'll be able to incorporate more of a pattern yourself as well. So again, we're just going to work our way back over to the other. And as you can do, you can E-wrap. I'm just doing E-wrap knit across. And if you want, you can knit these over now if you want. But again, we're just going to work it till we get to where we see our stitch marker. Okay, we're getting close to our stitch marker, and that means we're going to stop right here. Go ahead and knit this one over. And now go ahead and go back through and knit all those over, if you hadn't done it as you worked your way around. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to finish going around to the other side, just knitting this over. I'm on the last one, having worked my way back through. So these are all knitted over. Now again, if you're looking at it this way, we've got our stitch marker here and we've got our stitch marker here. We've already worked our way around to this side. Now we need to work our way back around this way until we get back to this stitch marker. So you're going to go ahead and do the E-wrap knit this way, working this way, and stopping at where the stitch marker is. But before you do that, I want you to go ahead, push these all down and work your way back to the other stitch marker. But before you work your way back, go ahead and wrap this peg and wrap this peg, because we need them to be that way for another time. But we're not going to knit them over. Do not knit these over. Just wrap them. And then continue on from this one and start knitting these over until you get back over to our other stitch marker. Okay, we are back, getting close to our stitch marker on the opposite side again. So you're going to work your way again over to that stitch marker right there, which is right here, and you're just going to finish knitting over. Press them down a little bit. Now what you want to do is take each of your stitch markers that are here and here. Let the camera zoom here a little bit. And you want to take the stitch markers that are at these points, move them each out one. And these become your next points that you're going to be working to. And I'm going to come over here and do the same thing, moving it over one. So again, this time when we work, we're working our way as a flat panel till we hit our stitch markers, same way we did before. And again, just like we did over here where we rewrapped the pegs that we were done with, when we rewrap these twice, as you can see, we're going to do the same thing over here before we work our way back. So go ahead and push these down. I usually like to push them down after each row. Makes it a little easier. And this is basically the process we're going to do. But we're not going to do as many as you think. It's not going to get as tedious as you probably think. We just want to create a point where it's going to turn into a curve to make it the hooded part of the cowl. So again, before you work your way back going the other way, you want to wrap these pegs. Rewrap and rewrap these pegs. So I know it looks weird because you're going back over to this one, and you wrap that one. And then you're going to leave this one alone because we already knitted it when we came this way. And then we're going to continue on doing our E-wrap knit, starting with this peg here. And again, we're going to work our way around the loom until we get to this point over here with this stitch marker on it. Okay, so we're getting close to our stitch marker here. So we're just finishing up our E-wrap knits that we have to do. Again, we E-wrap knit this one. Oops, got a little tangled in my yarn there. Knit it. Now again, we're going to work our way back as a flat panel this way until we hit our stitch marker here. I'm going to go ahead and rewrap this peg, but leave it alone. Make sure I did that right. Peg, and then work our way back over to the other stitch marker. Leave that one alone. Knit this one over. So continue this until we get over to the other side. We're working our way back to the other side again. Okay. Now again, I made a mistake. Go ahead and knit this one over. And then rewrap it because we needed to work to that peg. I got a little off track of which one I was doing. So just knit that over and then do it like normal because we came our way back, so I'm going to knit that over. And now again, you're going to take your stitch markers that are in these locations and move them each out one more time, so you know where your stopping point is on each side as you work your way back and forth. Go this one and move this one out. This just makes it easier for a visual of knowing where you ended. It's just, for me, it kind of helps me, but if you decide that it doesn't help you, then just simply don't use the stitch markers and just remember the pattern. But this makes it nicer for you to know, if you've already done it, if you have to take a stop in between the project. And just like we did on the other side, we're going to, because we already knitted this peg over that had it on it, and as you can see, we've got our two strands here. We want to rewrap this one. I'm going to go ahead and rewrap this one that we just did, so it's ready for the next time, and then start again. I apologize for the blurriness. And then go again where we're working our way back to the other side and getting to where our stitch marker is on this side. So go ahead and do that again. We're working our way back to on the other side till we get to this peg, as I just said. And again, we're going to wrap this peg, knit over. Okay, and then again, we got to work our way back till we get to the peg on the other side. So and remember, each time you do it, you're going to take the peg that you just knitted off, and you're going to rewrap it, but not knit it over as you work your way back through. So again, as you do it, you're going to start seeing double loops here, and you're going to see that you're going to continue on and go back the other way, but don't do this one. And then what I want you to do is continuing this process as moving the pegs, moving your stitch markers out, and you're only going to need to do it until you hit, let me count the pegs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, we're going to go to the 13th peg. Sorry, I was getting a little confused in my counting. So you're going to keep doing this back and forth pattern until you have done it in 12 pegs, or 13 pegs, sorry. And then we'll move on to the next step. Now, after you've worked the process back and forth again till you got to the 13th peg, as you can see my stitch marker, now we're going to do this. You should have it looking somewhat like this. I'll turn it over so you can see. It looks somewhat like this. Now, in order to make it a full kind of hooded, we need to work our way back out of the pegs, out of the loom, excuse me. So we have our stitch markers located. Let me see if I can find the one. Located up here and over here. We've got our stitch markers at these locations. We're going to continue going back and forth, but this time we're working our way out of the loom. We're going to work our way back down until we get all the way back to these starting pegs here. So you're going to do the same process as we were doing when we worked our way in the pegs of the loom to work them out of the pegs of the loom. So what that means is once we get here, we're going to edge our, we're going to move our stitch markers down one on each side, and then we're going to work a little further each time, working back and forth, and going as we go back and forth, we'll eventually work our way back out of the loom. Now, as you do this, it's going to be a little trickier, because what you have to do now is as you work your way back and forth on the loom, as you notice, we have spots where we have double loops. This means as you work your way back and forth, when you hit the pegs that you're wrapping and you have these 2 extra loops right here, you're going to want to make sure you knit these both over the same time as the peg. So that way it kind of catches these. So again, what we have to do, the first thing we have to do is I still have my pegs on the 13th mark. That means I now need to move them in one. So as I work back and forth, I know where I'm stopping, which means my next stop point is going to be moving it back out one instead of in one. And you want to go on to the other side, and again you're moving it out one. Before we were moving them in this way, now we're moving them one by one as we do each row out. So again, I'm moving this over just so that I can keep an eye on it. Now the only reason you see 2 is I can take that one off now, but we're basically moving it over one on each side so that we know where we're stopping as we work our way back and forth. So this means when I go back to the start, now keep in mind too, this was our last peg was right here. I already moved one over. I'm going to remove this though because I don't need that as a marker anymore for me. This is where I had marked where the 13th peg was, so I knew when I had to stop. So that's something that you could do too. So what I got to do though is, because I moved this out, I never wrapped this one like we've been doing, so I'm just going to rewrap that one, and now I'm going to work my way across until I get to my next peg over here. Again, we rewrapped this peg. We're not going to do anything with that one yet until we work our way back over. Okay, so we're going to leave this one alone for now. We're working our way back over until we get to the other peg. Now as we're getting closer to where we need our peg is, remember we're going to see some that have 2 loops on it. Make sure you knit both of those over. Again, it may be a little tight depending on how you wrapped before, but you want both those bottom extra loops you have to go over. This time you don't need to worry about rewrapping this peg. Just work your way back over till you get to the next stitch marker. And again, once you get closer over to the next stitch marker that you'll have, which you see is coming up right here, you're going to knit both those pegs over. Or both those loops over, sorry. Making sure if you doubled up your yarn, you get all the yarn as well. Because it's very easy to skip a loop on it, but when you wrap that last peg that has the stitch marker, again, remember, you've got extra loops on there from when we rewrapped it before. And make sure you grab all of the loops that are on there. Now again, you're going to lay it out and you're going to move your stitch marker out one more on each side. And you're going to continue that, going back and forth until you work your way, make sure you move it out one this way, one this way, because you're working your way back to getting all these pegs to be knitted over on both sides. So again, move your stitch marker out one if you need to, unless you can remember, and move it back out. Now the working it out is actually a little easier to remember because, again, you have the double loops on there, so you'll easily be able to tell where you left off without having to have a stitch marker if you choose not to. So make sure when you move it out on one, you switch over to the other side and you move it out as well. It just makes it easier to keep track of what you're doing. Okay, and then go ahead and work your way, again, back and forth. Continue doing that until you end up having done the process all the way down those rest of those pegs until you get to the last, let me see where the last one is, until you get to the last peg that has the double wraps. And then we move on to the last step in order to make this cowl. Once you have continued doing the back and forth, working your way back out again for the looms, your product should look similar to this if you turn it over. This is our actual hooded part of the cowl now. We created that opening. Excuse me. And because we rewrapped those pegs before we knitted them over, you don't actually totally see the holes in the project as easily as we did when I did the hooded scarf video. So this is kind of an update on that. When you rewrap pegs like we were doing, and then we went back through and we knitted the 2 extra loops over the one, it kind of hid that a little more in the project so you wouldn't actually see these big gaping holes. But this is our hooded part. Now what I want to do is I want to continue working my way just simply back and forth for at least, just simply E-wrap our way back and forth like we were doing. This will be 1 row, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're actually going to work 6 then, so we can always have, I like starting on the same part. So if we work our 6, we'll be back at our starting point. Now that we have our 6 rows completed, we're going to work on closing off the gap that we have here, because now we want to utilize these 2 pegs that we had left empty. And what you're going to do is you're going to work your way around. This time we're going to do the purl stitch, and we're going to work our way around doing the purl, and then when we hit these stitches, you're just going to wrap them the first time around, obviously. And then we're going to continue doing purl stitches for another, excuse me, we're going to do the purl for 5 more rows, 6 more rows, sorry, in a round. We're going to go around 6 times, purling. And again, the first time around, you're going to be wrapping these empty pegs. The second time around, you'll be purling those pegs. So go ahead and work your way around. Remember, in a complete circle this time, wrapping the empty pegs, and then when you go back again, you're going to purl them. So go ahead and do that for 6 more rows, and then we'll move on to the next step. After completing your 6 rows, you'll see that you actually closed off where the empty pegs were. So this is how it should be looking when you turn it over to see we actually have it bound off. We've connected these 2 parts together. So now the next part just becomes on how long you actually want the cowl part to be. And again, when I put this on, because I can actually fit my head through this while it's on the loom, my chin is right about in this area. So it doesn't, the cowl isn't going to cover your face. It's going to pretty much be low. It's more like a hooded thing. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to work down further so that in a sense you could almost flip the cowl up to cover part of your face if you wanted to. So you can, in the front at least. That way the back will still kind of be down some, but you could pull a front piece of the cowl up to put over your face when you're walking or such. And the idea that I have is when I continue down, once I decide, I'll come back and let you know how many rows I did down, because I honestly don't know how many I'm going to do right now. But what I'm going to continue is keep doing the purl stitch. I like the look of the purl stitch against the doing the E-wrap knit, and then we're going into the purl. So I'm going to, let me zoom in here. Like as we go from one to the other, this is our regular E-wrap knit, and then we're going into purl. So I'm going to keep the cowl in the purl. I completed 21 rows, and now I'm ready to take it off. Again, it's a matter of how length that you want it down from your neck. I'm viewing the part where the hood part ends at my chin and going down from there. And I don't want it to be too bulky, and I still believe it can be flipped up to cover some of my face if I need to, if it's a really windy day. Now you can choose, I'm going to do the crochet cast off. There's 2 reasons for it. I like the cast off using this loom, and second of all is if I take this off and later on I decide I want to make it longer, I can use those spaces I get from doing a crochet bind off and place them back on the loom and add more to it, or crochet to add more length to it. But again, we're going to do the crochet bind off to take this off the loom and have our project completed. So we're going to first take and we're going to rewrap the last peg once, making sure we get 2 strands. Rewrap it again. You want to do at least 2 times. Once you complete the 2 times, go ahead and move this loop over to the next loop. Knit that over. Now that's what I did for the first one. For the other ones going around, I'm going to do 3 extra loops, just to ensure that it's wide enough at the bottom. So now I'm going to go ahead and, for the rest of them, and rewrap a peg 3 times. So once, knit over, twice, knit over, and the 3rd time knitting over. Then again, go ahead and take this loop onto the next loop. And continue this process till you get to the end, and then I will show you how you join them together. We are on the last 2 pegs that we need to do. I just moved this last loop over, so I need to do the knit over and the rewrapping of 3 times. So 1, 2, and 3. Now go ahead and move this onto the final peg. Knit over. And now comes the part where we gotta take this off the loom and connect this to the other side so that we have a full circle. For that, you're gonna want a crochet hook, and you're gonna want some scissors. Now what you're gonna do is leave yourself at least about a foot of yarn to be able to use for casting off. And then you go ahead and measure out about 12 inches of your working yarn and cut it. You can choose to do more if you want to be extra safe. And now you're going to take your crochet hook. I'm using a size, size I or 9, but again, it's whatever uses. I tend to use whatever I have hand. There's certain crochet hooks that are meant for certain thicknesses, but I just tend to use whatever I have on hand. So I'm going to take this loop off of the project, and I'm going to place it on my crochet hook. Now go ahead and remove your loom. When you lay it out, you're going to be able to see how we have a gap. This is where we ended, and over here is where we began. We need these to be joined together. But because we didn't do our 3 chains in between, we need to do that first. So I guess with chains because I'm right-handed. And we're just going to make 3 simple chains. So 1, 2, and 3. And now we, oops, I missed the yarn because I didn't get a red. Get over here. There we go. Okay, once you got both on there, now look for where you ended, which is over here. And I'm going to flip this a little bit for me so that I'm working the same way because I am right-handed. So I'm going to flip this. So I'm going to take my crochet hook and I'm going to go into one of the last stitches. Well, one of the beginning stitches actually. And then you're going to take the back loop over that one. And that helps join it around in a complete circle. Now take your working yarn that you still have. Go ahead, wrap it around the crochet hook and pull it all the way through. Give it a little tug, and now what I want you to do is make sure you're working the inside of the project. We're going to simply take, and because we're using 2 strands, we're going to do a little different technique. We're going to take one of the strands we're working with and go through 1 stitch on one side. We're going to pull the one color through. I'm going to use green just so it's opposite. Pull that through, leave it alone over there for a second. Take your other part of your double strand, go this way. If you don't have that, you're just going to have to use one single strand and do this knotting thing. But we're taking advantage of using 2 strands right now. Now keep in mind, I am looking through a camera, so this is why I'm a little slow. Get in there. Okay, I need to look and see where I'm trying to go here. You basically just want a stitch. It doesn't even have to be perfect. And then grab your other tail of your working yarn and the 2 strands you use, pull that through. Now what you're going to do is simply tie these 2 together. Again, if you're using 1 strand, you would need to just kind of make sure you tie it into the project somehow. And I know I've shown that in other videos. And what I usually like to do is like a double knot, just because I want to make sure it's snug. And I will show you real quick. If you only had 1 strand, if we were treating these as 1 coming off the project, then all you would simply do is find another stitch. Again, if you were treating them as 1, and you'd bring them both through part of the way. Don't go all the way through. Go a little ways, so you end up having 2 tails on both sides. You bring it up as much as you need. Again, this is if it was 1 strand. I'm going to bring it up. That's why you want to have enough on the end. And then you would simply do the double knot as well, like we just did when we had 2 strands. And then you can just take your scissors and cut it to the loop. And then you would trim these down and hide the stragglers in to the project. But I can cut them down a little bit because I don't need them that long. And then I would use my crochet hook and I would hide them in the project by picking up stitches and working it. Oops, a little hard to do here. It's fighting me. Picking up stitches and just kind of pulling the yarn through to kind of hide it. And that is the hooded cowl. And again, you're going to have a working strand up here as well. So again, you're going to do the same thing, just take that into the inside. Like just find a way to bring it, not being where it's in the way, and just kind of bring it over to the other side. And you can kind of tie it off if you want, and then you can trim it. But that's the hooded cowl. I hope you like it.